Remember licensed games? I sure do. Taking a cartoon from an existing piece of media such as television, movies, or books, and turning it into a video game was a popular trend for a long time. I mean, who doesn't want to play as Barry B. Benson, where you gotta run around a hive and hijack cars while doing odd jobs like it's Grand Theft Auto? It practically prints money. Sadly, however, with video games becoming more and more expensive to produce, and not to mention expectations for said games being higher and higher, it's resulted in licensed games to be a bit of a dying art form. Sure, we'll get one occasionally like Nick All-Star Brawl or Multiverses or Peppa Pig the video game, but nowhere near to the extent as they used to. Which sucks for me, because if you took a look at my game collection, you'd be disgusted at how many of these are based on a TV show or movie. I've got all-time classics like Garfield 2, Madagascar, and who could forget Disney Channel All-Stars, starring all your favorite characters from Zack and Cody, Hannah Montana, Wizards of Waverly Place, and Camp Rock 2, The Final Jam. Wait, why do I own this? Point is, as a kid if it wasn't Mario, Sonic, or a licensed game, I wasn't interested. I recall once my dad took me to a game store and told me that I could get whichever game I wanted, and my immediate choice was Mr. Bean on the DS. Yeah, he forced me to get Crash of the Titans instead. But you know what's better than a licensed game based off one TV show? How about a licensed game based off a bunch of TV shows, all slammed together into one epic crossover? We're currently living in the age of crossovers. Nobody wants to watch a movie with Spider-Man now, unless Stewie Griffin is gonna join him. And with a multiverse so ripe for franchises combining, it always reminds me of my absolute favorite crossovers of all time. The Nicktoons games. Sure, Jimmy Timmy Power Hour is one of the best specials of a kid's cartoon ever, but you know who's missing here? Spongebob and Danny Phantom. And that's where the Nicktoons games come in. Starting all the way back with Nicktoons Racing in 2000, this is a series that combines a ton of Nickelodeon franchises together to take part in whatever genre the dartboard lands on. Basketball? Sure, why not?
I wish I could dunk!
A fighting game? Fuck it, make 6 of them. Baseball? Only if they're motion tracked. Ugh. My personal favorites, however, would have to be the saga of platformers that released from 2005 to 2008, pairing up different heroes from throughout the Nickelodeon universes to take down a common evil, which I like to call the Spongebob and Friends saga, because that's what they're called in Europe and allows them to stand out among this other bunch of games. Not to mention, by the last entry, Nick lost all confidence in anything that wasn't SpongeBob, and just titled the thing SpongeBob SquarePants featuring Nicktoons. Nice, I'm glad he let them tag along. Now, I've already made a video about these 4 games, all released on the PS2, and eventually the Wii. But did you know that I actually missed a bunch of them? Yeah, something I completely glossed over in that video was that each of these entries had handheld ports, with the first 3 being released on the Game Boy Advance and DS, with the last just getting a DS version. And calling them ports isn't even accurate, because they're entirely different games, sometimes taking on completely different genres compared to their console iterations. And now while the console versions may have received such glowing reviews as, "It's friggin' SpongeBob," well, they're not wrong, I rarely see anybody talk about these 7 games. So considering I'm one of the rare few people on planet Earth to play these 4 religiously, I figured why not give the handheld versions a shot. I mean, hey, the console ports weren't anything to write home about. The best one in that bunch was just alright. So I'm definitely curious to see if I can manage to call any of these good. Guess there's only one way to find out. So let's finally complete this series of games by taking a look at the handheld Nicktoons saga. But first, Manscaped.com. You guys all know Manscaped by now, with their amazing men's grooming products such as the Lawnmower 4.0 body trimmer, but did you also know that they now have this ultra smooth package, which they've graciously sent me? This product, which sold out in less than 3 months back in 2021, contains an easy 3-step shaving system to help you buff, protect, and smooth your most sensitive areas with confidence. They've got the Crop Exfoliator, which helps reduce ingrown hairs while shaving, the Crop Gel, which helps you see while shaving, and the new Crop Shaver, with 3 precision blades with wide lubricating strips, and a pivoting head for the best shave at any angle. So be sure to go to manscaped.com to get 20% off, plus free international shipping, and be sure to check out their new ultra smooth package. And thanks to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. This isn't the best first impression. This color combination of white and green is just ugly, and I guess this game confirms that Timmy Turner is indeed a ghost like Danny, considering Jimmy and SpongeBob have drop shadows but not him. R.I.P. Timothy, R.I.P. The story of Unite in the GBA is basically the exact same as the console version, which to me was always the best story out of any of these games. Jimmy finds out that Professor Calamitous has teamed up with the villains from various universes, Plankton, Mr. Crocker, and Vlad, which was always so funny to me, like clearly there's some discrepancy between these guys. And so to put a stop to them, Jimmy uses the power of crusty PNGs to transport Spongebob SquarePants, Danny Phantom, and Timmy Turner over to him so they can all team up and put a stop to the Syndicate. So just how are they gonna do this? By tediously going to each character's world and closing ghost portals and collecting chips. That's all you do in this game. Yes, I said game, cry about it. Seriously, they were getting really desperate with available PNGs they could use in these cutscenes. One of them is literally just a cropped out image of Plankton from the actual episode with the lever removed. I mean, yeah, I guess it's not as bad as the Spongebob movie game.
How are we gonna get back to Bikini Bottom?
I can take you there.
The fuck is that? Also, I know it's dumb to make fun of the writing of a Game Boy Advance game, but some of the character exchanges here are just so weird. It makes me wonder why they even bothered to include some of this. Vlad's channeling ectoplasm to the Doomsday device. We need to close the ghost portal. What about those ghost animal thingies? I don't believe in ghosts. Thanks for the input, Jimmy. Oscar-worthy dialogue right here. The whole gimmick here is that you're running around a big open stage looking for 4 chips to collect and 3 ghost portals to destroy. It took me forever to even realize this though. When I first came up to the portal, I shot at it for ages without it breaking, so I figured I had to go and do it later on, and just ran away. Only to later figure out that you have to shoot at these things for an obscene amount of time for them to break. The hit detection on them is terrible. Most of the time your weapon just shoots right through the thing. And speaking of weapons, you can play as all 4 Nicktoons here, each with their own unique moves and abilities. And by that I mean they can do move and ability, 1 each. Danny can shoot ghost lasers and go through walls. Jimmy can freeze enemies with his ray gun and go upwards on his jetpack. Timmy can shoot magic and go upwards in a balloon. And Spongebob can squash under tight ceilings and shoot water. The balancing here is all out of whack. I almost never played as Spongebob and Danny because of their moves being so situational, and I'd say that Jimmy is worth playing as if it weren't for the fact that Timmy is just a better version of him in every way. They have the exact same upwards ability, but not only does Timmy's attack go all around him for the best range, but it also kills enemies in 1 hit, instead of simply freezing them for a couple seconds. And because the enemy will most likely run into you while you're using the attack, you'll more often than not immediately get the health upgrade that they drop, negating the damage. Hey, I mean, I like Timmy Turner as much as the next guy, but you didn't need to make him so bloody overpowered. I often find myself not giving a shit about whatever was in my way and I just ran through all the obstacles, because running out of health with this kid was impossible. Psst, developers. I have to say that for objectivity, but thank you. The biggest issue with all this, however, is that with so many character-specific moments and levels, you'd hope that there'd be some kind of way to manually switch through all of the heroes, but no, that would make sense. Instead, you can choose only 2, and anytime you want to switch, you have to travel all the way to one of these pods that they're very stingy with the placements of. Now, this wouldn't entirely be a problem, except both characters have to be present in order to switch. No, this wouldn't entirely be a problem, except your partner character doesn't follow you most of the time, and you have to switch to them to run to the pod too, basically having to run around the same terrain twice. Now, this wouldn't entirely be a problem, except certain characters are unable to traverse through certain segments, and therefore cannot get to the pod, meaning now you have to switch back to the one at the pod, and run all the way back to the other guy to try and find another one you can both reach. Now, this wouldn't entirely be a problem. No, wait. That's a huge fucking problem. This gameplay is so goddamn tedious, and every level is like that. There is no variation on what you're doing, which means each one of them suffers from the same design flaws. And it would have been such an easy fix. Just make it so you can switch characters with only one needing to be there. But then, that could simply be exploited to get other characters in areas that were never meant for. But if that's the case, and to work around it you need to implement this kind of system, that sort of points out a big flaw with the way you've built your video game. Who knows though, maybe the bosses shall fare better. I literally beat Vlad by standing still and pressing the attack button. The second boss against Plankton ended up being way harder, to the point where I actually died. And that's where I realized that upon dying, you're just respawned in the exact same place with no consequence. In regards to presentation, the only real plus I can give it is that the backgrounds look nice and are emulated well from the original shows. And some of the enemies can be neat callbacks, such as Plankton's cousins in the Chum Bucket. But other than that, they for some reason chose to use this really ugly pre-rendered style for the character models, where they're done in 3D and then translated down into sprites, and it simply doesn't work. I don't see why they didn't just use traditional sprite work here. The character models are awful. Jimmy has these long, dumb monkey arms, and Danny... Why did they go with such realistic proportions? He looks gross. I'm sorry, this game fucking sucks. I got to Timmy's house and had to call it quits. It was so unbelievably boring. Sorry, Butch. The console version of Unite surely wasn't the best thing in the world, but I now have some newfound respect for it. At least in every level I was doing something different. Here it's the same routine again and again with a different coat of paint. No wonder this version is mostly forgotten. We're not off to a good start here, are we? But hey, we're not out for the count yet on Unite. It still has a chance to redeem itself. Could the DS version be any better? Or is the Unite series gonna bat 0 for 3? Let's find out. Heh, look at the box art. You know what I'm just now noticing? Timmy and Jimmy are holding the exact same gun, despite Timmy not even using a weapon in this game. Anyways, I actually played this game as a kid. It's one of the two on this list that I had prior experience with, albeit very minor. When I was in Spain one year with my family, we found one of those weird bootleg game stores, where they were selling those 795 games in one cartridges, with me and my sisters all getting one. What sucks, however, is that not all of them contain the same collection of games. And while I was stuck with fucking bloody Nintendogs or some shit, they got Nicktoons Unite on theirs. So I only have very brief memories of playing it when they let me borrow it, and I recall not even being able to beat the first level. See, when I was younger and playing video games, especially on handhelds, I couldn't get very far into most of them, because of this problem I have called not wanting to read tutorials. Then I'd run around for hours not knowing what to do and give up. I think this disease has an official name. Let me look. Oh yeah, Aaron Hansen syndrome. Nicktoons Unite on the Nintendo DS has the exact same story as the GBA port. And by exact same, I mean the exact same. Same PNGs, same text, same fucking font. How'd that happen? Oh, that makes sense. See, both of these versions of Unite were developed by Climax, the same developers. That's why the previous game used 3D models. I guess to save time, they just reused the character models they made for the DS port in the GBA one. Well, hey, at least we now gotta see them up close and personal. Why is it so hard for them to get Jimmy Neutron, the one character that originated from a 3D show, right in 3D? Well, at least Danny doesn't look as bad. First thing you can obviously tell about this port is that it's three-dimensional. Now that wasn't all too common for DS games at the time, you know, given its weaker hardware and lack of a directional pad. But let's see how it holds up. I guess since we've already discussed it, we could start with the presentation. And quite honestly, it doesn't look bad for a DS game. The game basically locks you into a small area connected by doors, but it never felt all too restricting. They did a good job at still making it feel like a big open world. And it's cool that they represent all the areas from the respective shows that you'd want to see, such as Casper High and Vlad's Castle, or Bikini Bottom and Kelp Forest. Although you can definitely see their struggle in trying to make some of these places connect. Like for some reason Patrick has a metal room under his rock that's covered in lava that leads to the Krusty Krab. I don't remember that in the show. And like I said before, the character models ain't too bad aside from Jimmy's scrunched up face. My favorite detail would have to be Spongebob's drop shadow, which is just a fucking rectangle. It's really funny to me for some reason. But how about the gameplay? How does it compare to other 3D platformers on the DS, such as, I don't know, Crash of the Titans? I mentioned it earlier. I actually like that game. I don't know why I'm making fun of it. Well, in theory, it's very similar to the handheld version. Each character has a couple moves that you can use to traverse through levels, and thankfully they've done a better job at making most of them feel useful. Most of them. At least I can switch to any of the four at a given time, I guess. Although, I suppose to balance it out, it would only make sense for Timmy to be the worst, most situational character here, compared to the GBA version where he was a god. Jimmy has a shrink ray he can use to very slowly shrink enemies, and the much more handy feature of a double jump. Spongebob can use his underwear to glide and blow bubbles, Danny can shoot ghost blasts and wall jump, and Timmy... well, Timmy has a dash, apparently, but honestly, I didn't notice any difference in his speed compared to the others. And he can also disguise himself in a bush to sneak past enemies. Yeah, he did that in the show all the time. There are also character-specific items you can retrieve, which fills a gauge on the right side of the screen, which gives you an extra move to use when tapping the symbol on the touchscreen, which, by the way, fucking makes it near impossible to play this on an emulator. Such as Danny phasing through walls, Jimmy using his jetpack to reach greater heights, and SpongeBob using a bubble to reach greater heights. Wait a minute. I never found out what Timmy's did, though. You'll find out why in a bit. And of course, being a Nintendo DS game, they gotta make some use out of that stylus. So we have a variety of minigames you can play, such as circling jellyfish and swiping ghosts into a portal. It's not fun, but hey, it's padding. Well, this is good and well, except for the parts that aren't. But where they really fucked up here was the control. I understand it's gotta be hard to make a 3D platformer that uses a directional pad, but if that's what you want to do, then you gotta make sure the other aspects don't get in the way with that. See, you can manually rotate the camera around with the L and R button, but a lot of the time the camera will like try to follow you, which can fuck up your landing. Not to mention every time you jump, the camera pans upwards so you can't see the platforms anywhere. Yeah, that's a handy feature. I sure would hate to know where I'm going right now. I spent 30 fucking minutes running around one room in the first level trying to do one mission, just because every time I'd get to the top, the game wouldn't register my jump and I'd fall to my death. Fun. There's a lot of neat ideas here, but when you fuck up something as fundamental as the controls, then that's sort of a big issue. It never got as bad for me as it did that one time. They start to focus on way less vertical movement later on, thankfully. But there were times where I'd miss a jump or slip through a crack on the floor, and they're not generous with the checkpoints. So you're doing the same gameplay loop over and over again, and it wasn't even fun to begin with. It is cool, however, that a lot of the music here is reused from the GBA version. It's neat getting to hear how the same songs would come out each system. Finally, we have the boss fights, and surprise, they also suck. For the Vlad one, I could literally just stand in place and jump when a projectile was coming towards me and win easily. You have to shoot the right one and not a clone, but there's no indication as to which is which. So you just stand around shooting each one that comes by hoping it's the right one. And they don't even play a victory animation or anything, it just awkwardly cuts back to text. The Plankton one though... Okay. So what you do is, you shoot him with your bubbles while he's riding a giant mecha jellyfish. However, he sucks you down into this small arena, and you have to defeat more robot jellyfish in the hopes that one will randomly drop some bubble soap, so you can make your way back up, with each hit slightly decreasing the size of the robot. Cool, sounds simple enough. But I just kept hitting the fucker, and he wouldn't go down. Vlad only took 3 attacks, but this guy had like 30. Or so I thought. Now, I have to assume the game bugged out or something and forgot to inform Plankton that he had died because he had the iron will and just kept going. His jellyfish got so small you couldn't even see it and he was still putting up a fight. And then, I guess because the game didn't know how to make it any smaller, it just started growing again, but upside down. I don't think this is meant to happen. It ended up getting so big that I couldn't get out of the arena without it hurting me, so I promptly turned the game off and vowed never to touch it again. Nicktoons Unite on the DS isn't the worst thing in the world. I'd still say the GBA version is way worse, but it's for certain nowhere near good. The gameplay is mostly monotonous and brain dead. You're just running around and killing the same enemies over and over again. And when it's not drab and boring, it's infuriating, because of the controls that feel like they're fighting against you. But yeah, you know what's the best part of all this? We're all done with Unite. Now we can finally move on to Volcano Island for GBA and DS. If you remember my last video, you'd know it's probably my favorite out of the 4, so I'm hoping the handheld versions follow suit. Dude, look how fucking pissed Patrick is on the title screen. This man is out for blood. Instead of having all the heroes team up against their respective villains, Volcano Island features the Nicktoons being summoned to Volcano Island from this wise old crab, whose island is at stake due to the monster the Magoo being unleashed, and so Spongebob, Danny, Timmy, and friends have to put a stop to him. Fucking lazy-ass Jimmy. This game just kinda drops you in, too. At least in the console version, we get to see the crab summon Spongebob and Danny to the island. Here we just have it open with Timmy falling and asking where everyone is. I guess that's what manuals were for, I suppose.
Let's just check and see what we have to... Oh wait, the game didn't ship to me in time.
First of all, can I just take a minute to appreciate that this is a screenshot from an official game? Those were the days. Gotta say, opening on Timmy Turner had me completely on board. But in the biggest fucking tease of the century, we immediately ship to SpongeBob and have to rescue Danny, then Timmy like 2 worlds in. I gotta say, the sprite work for this game is amazing. I was really surprised at how high quality it was. The characters are all super stylized, to fit into one uniform aesthetic, instead of trying to replicate the style of each individual show, which works way better for a handheld game like this. Wait a minute. Fuck, well, this isn't gonna help with the comparisons. Now, a big issue with Unite was that all the characters were way too fucking big on the screen, which made it hard to see upcoming obstacles. But here, everything is made nice and clear. The characters' moves are all portrayed well to the player, like how Danny's ghost form has an actual transition this time instead of a jarring change in model, or how Timmy squashes and stretches when pulling on a grapple, or doing his Sonic jump. They all have fun little idle animations too. The presentation here is top notch, there's so much personality. I love that when you go inside a level, none of the characters fit in the little transporter and therefore each have a unique squished pose. Stuff like that really gives your game a certain charm to it. That's hard to replicate. But you can tell whoever worked on the visuals here really put a lot of time and effort into it. A criticism I have of the visuals, however, is something that the console version also suffers from, and that's that when your whole game's gimmick is that it takes place on an island, it limits a lot of your locales, and you can see this reflected in the worlds we have here. We have beach level, jungle level, fossil level, and who could forget desert level. It also has fossils. It can just be a tad samey at times, and I wish there were a bit more variety. Thankfully though, what the game lacks in unique levels, it more than makes up for with the gameplay. Volcano Island is a standard enough platformer. Much like Unite, you can switch between 4 characters, Spongebob, Danny, Timmy, and Patrick, who all have 1 to 2 moves each that they can perform to help you get through a level. Giving each character around 1 move may seem limited, but it works entirely in its favor. See, they had this really neat idea that Climax may have never heard of called letting you play as whoever you want whenever you want. Simply pressing a button cycles through your roster on the fly, and because they can each perform 1 special action, it could be seen as something similar to the arsenal you get in a Mega Man game, where you choose whichever can get you through the scenario the best. Spongebob is used for, who could have guessed, blowing bubbles, except instead of solely being used for an attack, the longer you hold down the button the further its reach, with it floating up in the sky at the end, which can be used to activate certain switches, with them later on gaining a tunneling move. Patrick can use cannons and glide around using gusts of wind to reach higher places and stick to walls. Danny's ghost ability is the best it's ever been used. Instead of simply phasing through walls, you transform back and forth to make certain blocks visible. And Timmy, well, Timmy for some reason just turns into Rise Star. All of these moves make it really fun traversing through levels, as at times you gotta get fairly good at switching between characters on the fly to use whatever one is needed. And they make some good challenging segments out of this. And if that's too easy for you, they've also integrated a ranking system of some kind. You can collect 5 golden hearts in a level, think of it like red star rings in Sonic. But unlike those, they also act as a health bar, so if you get hit, you lose one. So basically, to get the best rank on every stage, you need to find and collect each heart without losing a life, which can get pretty hard at times. They even unlock you some secret levels for after the main campaign, which is a cool reward. That's the gist of the gameplay. It's pretty simple, but it works entirely to its benefit. Each level is short and sweet, and there's only 16 to beat before the final boss, but I don't mind that at all. Like I said, short and sweet. Speaking of bosses though, we could have definitely used more of those. There's only the Mago at the very end, and even then, could it really even be considered one? You're just running to the goal trying not to get hit by the projectiles he's throwing at you. The PlayStation 2 version didn't have a ton of fights, but the ones it did have at least stood out, such as a giant sand monster and Plankton King. The hub world I also felt wasn't necessary. I get the idea behind it, not to mention locking off worlds naturally behind abilities you don't have yet is cool. It's much more immersive than a big locked symbol or something, but the layout for this is all over the place. I spent more time in between worlds trying to find the next one than I did in some of the stages. You know what else rules about this game though? The music. Some of them I could take or leave, like the more atmospheric ones, but a majority of these tracks are great. It's super bouncy and catchy, I love them. The guy who composed the themes made a few YouTube videos where he goes over them, and even shows some unreleased songs that never made it in. So definitely go check that out if you want to. Finish this one first, like the video, subscribe. Battle for Volcano Island on the Game Boy Advance was a breath of fresh air. An actual good game for once. I'd probably put it above the PS2 version because of how much more polished it is compared to that, even if my nostalgia wants me to say it can't be topped. But with a short campaign of around 2 hours, I'd recommend checking this one out if it interests you. I think you'd be surprised how fun it is. With its short but engaging stages and wonderful presentation. Here's the question though. Could the upgrade in hardware possibly top it? I mean, this is the Nintendo DS we're talking about here.
Which was known for its many, many quality titles, such as... It's not even in here.
The menu screen here is so lazy, it's just a stock PNG of SpongeBob with the Nick splat put over top a blank white background. This here is giving Unite a run for its money. Battle for Volcano Island on the DS thankfully has the same story as the GBA version, so there's not much else to go over here. Our heroes are summoned to stop the Magu, yada yada yada. Most glaring difference you could probably tell compared to Unite is that we're back to 2D gameplay instead of 3D, which is only for the better. I might prefer 3D games over 2D, but even I have to admit, trying to make a good 3D game on the DS is hard enough as it is, never mind on the probable shoestring budget these had. Also, unlike the previous version, we have some more characters here. You can't play as any of them, but they are here. Such as Patrick featuring these god-awful sprites. Yeah, you can't play as them this time, sadly, as well as Tucker from Danny Phantom. There's probably more that I'm not mentioning, but as you're gonna soon see, this one couldn't keep my attention for very long. Also, Jimmy is here too, like not on some projector thingy, he's physically on the island. Son of a bitch doesn't want to help. See, I was right, he is lazy. First thing I noticed here is how much worse the sprite work is compared to the other one. It's not bad or anything, but there's way less personality. The only thing it has over the GBA version is that the backgrounds are way more detailed and colorful, but I'd expect that from a version on a higher powered console. I don't know, just like look at Timmy here compared to Timmy from the other game and tell me what you think is more expressive. If you want expressive though, you'd better look over at the cutscene sprites. These things are abysmal. Spongebob Squarepants more like Spongebob Cube Shorts because this shit looks bootleg to hell. It's all like weird imitations of whatever style the character originates from. But whoever designed these mustn't have been getting paid enough because they look dreadful. Just look at Timmy's hand or Cosmo and Wanda. They didn't even try with Danny. He's always doing his stock hands down by his side pose and... Oh my god, Jimmy, what the fuck did that do to you? It's so weird too because I can tell exactly what they were referencing here, and it's those weird Jimmy Neutron comic books from the early 2000s. Ugh. I will give it this, the animations are all pretty good. I love the spin they do when they're switching places, and the added detail that when you fall from a large height your character shivers in shock. You know, I'd probably like this a lot more if it didn't stop me in place for 5 seconds, but that's neither here nor there. We're dropped into the first level where we're met with a plant with a dog's head. I'm just gonna be moving on. I ran around this first level for like half an hour having no fucking clue what I was meant to do. I got all the way to the end where the characters stopped at this door and were like, we need to get 3 crystals to open the door. To which I ran around killing every enemy I could. One of them was bound to hold the crystal, right? Well, no. What I later found out was that you have to fucking walk up to the dog plant creature and touch him with the stylus, and sometimes, just sometimes, they'll give you a crystal. It's fun. This doesn't change throughout the game either. In the second world, you have to give monkey plants a banana in the hopes of getting a crystal, but most of the time they'll just send out an attack. Yeah, that's neat. Now this doesn't seem too bad, until you remember that only one of the DS screens has a touchpad, meaning that you have to focus on verticality, and make sure that you get the thing on the bottom half of the screen so you can touch it. And after a while, it just gets tedious. Each and every level, it's the same song and dance. And because of the limited level variety seen here, it even more so causes the whole thing to blend together in my mind as one big mess. Well, maybe you'd think having 3 playable characters instead of 4 might condense it a tad, allow them to make sure each of them are fully fleshed out and fun to play. You'd think. The controls here just feel off. Platforming is especially hard. The jumps feel so delayed and your characters are so heavy, which can get very annoying in a game very reliant on vertical platforming to reach the goal. Spongebob can once again blow bubbles and glide. Danny can punch, being the strongest, and Timmy can double jump and has this weak-ass vacuum attack. If you want my unbiased opinion, just play as Timmy until another hero is called upon. His double jump makes the controls somewhat bearable. Danny doesn't even go ghost with his regular abilities here. Isn't that like his fucking gimmick? In between stages, there are these crappy minigames where you can stand over the shadow of the fruit dropping and collect it, avoiding spikes and snakes. I genuinely don't know what this is for. I don't think it goes towards anything. There's also a boss after every world at least. And hey, they're not the worst thing in the world. The plank guy even Naruto runs. These were probably the best part of the game, honestly. The music is also just alright. It's not the best, but not the worst. It fits the levels while playing them, but I have no interest in listening to this shit outside of the game. There are a measly 5 stages here, where you're just doing the same thing over and over again. The third world has a dolphin plant. That makes it different, right? I got to level 3 and called it quits. I got everything I needed with this one. Maybe the game gets, like, infinitely better for its final 3 stages, but it didn't keep my interest enough for me to get there. I don't know how the Game Boy Advance version managed to be 10 times better here, but I guess it's just because that one knew what it was and set its goal way back, just aiming to be a basic get-to-the-goal platformer, whereas here the very concept of needing to mindlessly walk around touching monkeys is flawed from the core. Not to mention that one gave you incentive to switching characters, and made each of them fun to play in their own right, while this one rarely has any character-specific gimmicks other than, see a tall ledge? Use Timmy. See a big gap? Use Spongebob. And Danny's here too, I guess. So with its shitty, repetitive, boring gameplay and poor controls, Volcano Island is going second on the list so far. It really says something about Unite, doesn't it? So overall, Volcano Island's 2 handheld entries ended up being a mixed bag. One very good game, and one that's just not even worth mentioning. So I'm curious to see if we're going to manage to find one that did the impossible and made 2 good versions for portable consoles. Sad to say, it seems like we've only gotten 1 chance left. Let's hope it's a good one. If you remember my review from way back when, you'd know that Attack of the Toybots was my second favorite out of the bunch. Despite being incredibly short, only having around 7 levels with 1 being the tutorial and 2 crappy mech stages, and hell, not a single boss even though it advertised these cool fucking robot designs of the main characters on its box, I still find it to be a fun time, mainly due to its surprisingly challenging stages that tested your reflexes, yet never became frustrating with the forgiving checkpoints and infinite lives. So let's see just what the GBA version has to offer, with it being our last look at the system for the video, as Attack of the Toybots released pretty late into its lifespan. It's another 2D platformer here. You'd think with 3 of them by now they would have perfected it. The plot is, surprise surprise, the exact same as its console counterpart, with Professor Calamitous, yes I'll get to that, wanting to win the biggest genius award, and so he's harnessing energy from all the different Nicktoon worlds in order to prove this. Okay, so first of all, why the fuck are they using stock art of his goddamn Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 2 design? The first game it managed to use 3D screenshots well enough. I guess it's so he could easily be placed beside this fine fella. That's just a guy. We then see our 5 heroes locked up in a cell. I mean, they all seem pretty happy about it. Well, except for Timmy. But Cosmo and Wanda only have the energy to release one of them, which you can choose. Guess who I picked? Now, this is a neat idea, allowing the player to choose which character they want to start with. SpongeBob, Timmy, Jimmy, Danny, or Tack. Oh yeah, this is around when Tack was getting his own show. The games he first starred in were such a big hit that I can only assume Nickelodeon thought he was going to be the new big thing, and so started throwing him in with all the other Nicktoons to help advertise. His show was cancelled 26 episodes later. Graphics-wise, this game confused me. The character sprites look like they're trying to imitate the ones seen back on the good version of Volcano Island, which is a good thing, but the animations look way more cheap. They're nowhere near as expressive as last time, not to mention that we now have playable characters like Jimmy who just look bad. Every unique asset made for this game though was really ugly. The enemies look like they're done in an entirely different art style. The robots look like they've just taken the 3D model and tried to make it a sprite by tracing over it, which clashes a ton with your hero. The even bigger issue, however, is that they're so goddamn big, meaning they take up so much screen room that makes them hard to avoid. But I guess that's about why this game plays like shit, and not that it looks like shit, so I'll save my criticism. The locations also look boring as fuck. Fairy World has never looked so colorless. And when your game mostly takes place within a factory, it leads to worse location variety than Volcano Island. I don't know how the fuck that was even possible. So yeah, presentation here, mixed bag. But see, the structure is actually something that I think is really cool, and something that I wish they had done in the console version. In that game, other than Bikini Bottom, Amity Park, and Fairy World, all the levels take place within a toy factory, although they do offer some kind of differentiation at times, such as baby toys or space toys. But here how each level works is that each factory is in a different character's world. So you start in the outside, in Pupununu. That's Tax Town's dumb name, by the way. Or Fairy World, or the Ghost Zone. And after a bit you fall into the toy factory for the second half. That's not a bad idea. I wish all the factories didn't look the same, but I can't expect everything. Issue is, I spent ages running around the first level not knowing where to go. I'd see a bunch of stuff that Cosmo and Wanda would inform me that I can't get to. And so I run around forever only to find out that Timmy's special ability is turning into a frog so he can get under certain low ceilings. Yeah, that sure screams Timmy Turner. All the characters have one move they can do. Timmy's aforementioned frog, Jimmy can hack platforms to make them turn to other directions, Danny goes ghosts, Tack can climb, and Spongebob, I never found out what Spongebob did. I actually thought this was a really cool concept. It means that every time you'd go through a stage, you find yourself needing to take different routes here and there, encouraging extra playthroughs. It'd be better if the game were fun to play though. Again, like I said before, all the enemies are way too big. Timmy's main attack takes like 3 seconds of build up to actually go through, so by the time Cosmo and Wanda hurt them, they've already smacked me around. Although the game is so generous with checkpoints and there are no lives, so I find myself doing the exact same thing as Unite, where I just barrel through everything not giving a shit because I know that I'd probably reach the next checkpoint before dying. There's no challenge here other than the shitty controls. Oh look, it's Angelica. Alright, bye. There are segments where you can drive in mechs, which I thought was gonna be rad, but it only further exemplifies that mindset of not giving a shit, because these things are so powerful. It has infinite ammo, is way stronger than your regular moves, and has a fuck ton of health. This becomes even worse during the boss fights, where you face off against one of the character's robot doppelgangers. This is all I wanted as a kid. How cool is this gonna be? With the mech, you can just sit in place and attack it over and over again. If you lose said mech, it simply respawns back where you find it. Kinda underwhelming, not gonna lie. After each fight you get a key, which can be used to unlock another hero from their keyage. Naturally my first two were Timmy and Jimmy, awful sprite aside. So alright, cool, we beat Fairy World. Time to take on the second boss to see if it's any more challenging. What the fuck? Do I really have to beat each level over and over again with each new character I unlock? Is this really gonna get to a point where I have to replay levels 5 times in a row? That is fucking abysmal. That is such lazy padding. You may be wondering why this is an issue, considering each character gets some kind of unique pathway, but they still have to play the exact same intro and outro segment, and the fundamental controls are still the same, it just changes the way you get to the end. Also, it's just like nice to see a change of scenery at some points. I don't want to play through the same level potentially 5 times. Don't care what pathway I take. Imagine you're playing Sonic 3 and Knuckles and you beat Angel Island Act 1, then it teleports you back to the start like, great, now I beat the level, it's Knuckles. At that point, just give each Nicktoon their own campaign that you can pick at the start of the game instead of this shit. Volcano Island has shown us that a short but good game is miles better than a long but boring one. So yeah, that's why I never found out what Spongebob did. I got so bored that I had to give up. Neat locales are cool and all, but when I'm expected to play through them over and over again, it starts to get old. I don't even know why they made this one, considering nobody gave a shit about the GBA anymore by 2007. I can imagine that's why this one may have come out the way it did. Everybody was way more focused on the DS, so who knows, maybe that version will be better. I can only hope. Attack of the Toybots on the DS actually has a slightly different plot this time. Different plot, same awful Jimmy sprite. After SpongeBob and Patrick sneak into a toy factory that just opened up in Bikini Bottom, Patrick winds up getting kidnapped, and so Danny, Timmy, Jimmy, and Tack all jump down to help him get his friend back and take down the factories, which, like the others, are being run by Calamitous. The sprite work in the cutscenes might be the worst so far. Tack looks so fucking ugly, and Timmy has this weird like bump in his teeth. How can you fuck up the most iconic part of his design? First thing you probably notice here is that for once we don't have a platformer, 2D or 3D. Instead, Attack of the Toybots for DS is a pseudo 3D beat 'em up. It's quite simple. You run into a room, the game gives you a wave of robots to defeat, and then you move on. The gameplay sadly isn't the most interesting. Each character has one attack, do it 3 times for a stronger one, and hold in the button to do a super move. That's all you can do. There's no kind of combos or fun way of stringing together fun unique moves specific to the character, which is a little disappointing. Although I suppose switching up your character pairing each stage could possibly make things more interesting. I stuck with Timmy the whole time, predictably. Each character also has a special team move they can perform as well, but really it's just a screen nuke with a certain animation for each player. The game can be a little repetitive at times. Pretty early in, it's going to start asking you to defeat like 100 enemies per wave, and each level only has like 1 mini-boss each, which aren't that difficult. For some more variety, they also let you get in a mech at certain points, but really it's just as overpowered as the Game Boy Advance version. They tear through hordes of enemies so easily, it feels unfair. There are segments where they give you these short little tasks to do using the DS stylus, but they're not fun in the slightest. It's basic shit like, pull down the lever to crush a metal cube, or use this crane magnet to pick up a block with really shitty hit detection, or spin around this little thing to get the platform to match up. And then it's like really fucking precise though, it took me ages just to get this. At this point I was ready to call it quits on stage 1. What's the point if it's just gonna be this exact same thing the whole way through? But upon beating the first level, I was presented with this mini-game, where you ride around in the mech trying to get nuts and bolts while trying to get to the end. And that's where I started to get invested. See, during the stages when you defeat an enemy, you get the exact same nuts and bolts. I never knew what these were for. I had collected hundreds of these, and supposedly they weren't going towards anything. Until I got here. Turns out these are used as fuel for driving, with them constantly going down, and when you hit a crate you lose a bunch at once, so you have to reach the end of the level without running out. And after said driving level, you're faced with a boss fight against yet another robot doppelganger, except these are from a first person perspective and feel much more like a rival fight than a boss, which works out a lot better. It looks like fucking Punch-Out! What you have to do is shoot at them with your bullets, left for weak ones and right for stronger ones, but it takes longer to charge up, while avoiding their attacks towards you. For a while I was confused as to where my health was. The robot's is in the top left corner, but mine is nowhere to be seen. But that's when I realized that your screws also act as your health bar during a boss, with you losing a bunch after being hurt. This is where everything clicked. Such a simple way of combining all of these disparate missions together with something as integral as a collectible meter does wonders in unifying them all. It makes it so that there's an added challenge and something else to consider while playing through the regular stages. It almost removes that repetitiveness, as now I actively want to defeat the enemies and collect all the stuff, so that I go into the boss knowing I have the best chance of beating it. I'm surprised at how much this improves the game. What else improves the game? After each stage you unlock a new Nicktoon to play as. And not just from the already represented franchises either, there are new ones here too. On top of the normal 5 characters in your roster, you can also select Mr. Blick from Cat Scratch, Manny Revere from El Tigre, Jenny from My Life as a Teenage Robot, and Zim from Invader Zim. And if you collect all the extra character portraits in their racing levels, you can also unlock Gurr. They even have SpongeGar and Evil Danny as secret playable characters you get through cheat codes. That was cool. There's a lot of meat to this game, surprisingly, despite on the outside appearing to just be a simple beat-em-up. Not to mention the presentation here is top-notch, Timmy's brown pants aside. All the sprite work here is great, the moves are telegraphed well, and I love that all the locations are using 3D models. Creates this super stylized environment where the players stick out a bunch compared to the world. Really, the only thing I could want done better is having some more enemy variety. You're fighting the same bots constantly here just with a different coat of paint. If you're gonna make me fight 50 million enemies, I'd love to at the very least see some new ones every once in a while. The music is also the best out of the bunch we've seen so far. It's so fucking catchy. I love a majority of the tracks here, they're so funky. I was surprised how this game managed to turn me around, from wanting to only play it for around half an hour because I assumed it had no substance, to almost beating the whole thing. And I definitely find myself wanting to go back and finish it at some point soon. It was a lot of fun. So with superb presentation, simple but fun gameplay, and an engaging way of unifying all the different gameplay styles, I definitely recommend checking this one out. Can't believe we're 6 games in and we've only found 2 of them that are worth playing, but hey, that's 2 more than I thought we'd have. I don't know what it is, but anytime I see a console game get a handheld port, my automatic assumption is that it'll be worse. Maybe it's a result of me growing up with a mountain of crappy DS games like... yeah, that. But with the console versions not even being very good, I didn't have much hope for a single one of these things, but so far I've gotta say, I'm pleasantly surprised. So, I suppose there's only one more to go. Let's hope they go out with a bang. Coming out in 2008, the Game Boy Advance was mostly dead in the water at this point, so I take it they only felt it was worthy coming out in the DS, which was still going extremely strong. Speaking of dead in the water, these Nicktoons games in general. I can only assume that Attack of the Toybots didn't sell as well as they'd hoped, and so tried their best to have Globs of Doom perform better, dropping Nicktoons from the main title, and advertising it as more of a Spongebob video game. Since this is the last game we're looking at, you can assume it did not turn out as well as they'd hoped. I actually remember my friend owning this version of the game for his DS, and every time I tried to play it I had no idea what the fuck to do and put it down. I thought it sucked. Doesn't give me much hope. In Globs of Doom, all the heroes are summoned back to Volcano Island to investigate the mysterious orange goo falling from the sky and turning people into monsters. The whole gimmick here, however, is that not only do you play as the heroes, but their respective villains too. We've got Spongebob and Plankton, Danny and Technus, Jimmy and Beautiful Gorgeous, Sim and Dab, Tack and... Tax Villain. I've invited a team? Wow, Jimmy. You hand-selected who you wanted to come and didn't pick Timmy? What a dickhead. For a DS game, the presentation here is actually pretty good, once again combining sprites with 3D locations, which is a style I can't get enough of. All the locations are based on the characters' worlds too, which allows them to be varied and stand apart. Now the gameplay is where it starts to be very different. Globs of Doom is once again a 2D platformer, except what makes this one stand out is that you're playing as 2 fixed characters in a level, who you can freely switch between whenever you want. Although when you do switch, the other one doesn't go away, or even follow you, so your mission is to try and get both characters to the end. That sounds awful, and believe you me, I was thinking the same thing. But the more I played it, the more I realized that I really like this game. Each character has one special ability they can do. I won't go over all of them because there's so many characters, but for example, Spongebob can create a platform that goes upwards using a bubble, Technus can glide, Danny can walk through walls, and Plankton can ride on rockets. And much like the GBA version of Volcano Island, you have to know where and when to use their moves to get them further in the level. It's a lot slower paced of a game compared to that though. I'd almost call it a puzzle platformer, because there are a lot of times where you have to stop and think for a minute to figure out how you're not only going to get to the end of the level, but make sure your teammate gets there too. This results in a lot of stop and go gameplay, where you run around as one character looking for a button, so the other can get through their segment and vice versa. But I didn't mind this slower pace at all, because I find it fun to figure out these problems, and when you do you're like, oh yeah, I feel smart for besting this baby game. Just let me have this. You're even given a helpful map on the bottom of the screen that helps you see where you and your teammate is and what obstacles are around them. I'd much rather take that than the level being obscenely tall with so much empty space. The bosses suck though, you're just mindlessly attacking them when their weak spot is open and avoiding their easily avoidable attacks. It's brainless. I don't really have much to say here, honestly. This is just a solid little 2D puzzle platformer. Much better than the console version at the very least. That one sucked. I'm surprised. I don't see anyone talk about this one as much, but I could see myself coming back to it every once in a while when I want to relive the glory days of Nick crossover games. You're alright, All-Star Brawl, but the lack of Timmy games, that's what's doing ya. And don't give me that excuse of Timmy not being allowed in games because of contracting issues. If you haven't noticed yet throughout this entire video, Timmy has been in one or two of these things. But that's it. We're finally done looking at every game in this saga, excluding like fucking Freeze Frame Frenzy or whatever it's called. You take pictures, there, that's my review. I wasn't expecting to say this, but some of these games were actually pretty good. I'm stunned. With how mediocre the PlayStation ports were, I was only expecting these to be worse. But entries like Attack of the Toybots for DS, Globs of Doom, and the GBA Volcano Island were genuinely good times that I'd be more than happy to try out again at some point. If I were to give these games some kind of ranking from worst to best, it'd probably go something like this. Unite for the Game Boy Advance, Attack of the Toybots Game Boy Advance, Unite on the DS, Volcano Island on the DS, Globs of Doom, Attack of the Toybots DS, and finally, the winner, Volcano Island on the Game Boy Advance. It really is a shame that we don't see these things being made in the scale they used to be. Like I lamented at the end of my last video though, it's harder for them to do now considering what franchises have they got to work with. Since then, it's actually gotten worse. With no Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles show running, it's literally just Spongebob and Lincoln Loud. I guess Baby Shark too. Although, I think if Nick All-Star Brawl's initial hype can show us anything, it's that a lot of these older characters still have huge fan bases, who are more than willing to buy a product starring them. So I wouldn't see an issue with Nick maybe trying their hand at another crossover platformer at some point in the future. Even better if they could actually make it good. If not, however, I'll still be able to appreciate this selection of games, even the bad ones. Because the idea is just so cool to me, that these four franchises were able to cross over with each other on the yearly for nearly half a decade. I think maybe we took that for granted, but what are you gonna do? Okay, I had finished the video and all, but did you know that Nick made a series called The Portal Chases on the YouTube channel about the characters going to different Nick properties, starring fucking SpongeBob, Lincoln Loud, Ronnie Ann from the Cleveland show Lincoln Loud, and like Henry Danger from a live-action sitcom that was turned into a crappy animated Dan Schneider fucking feet lover. They had episodes where it's SpongeBob teaming up with Danny and Jimmy, and they still left out Timmy Turner. Why do they hate this kid so much? What did he do?
This is the outro. This is the outro. Keep this in.